Hi, pretty little lifters. Welcome back to the podcast. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Lauren Colenso-Semple. Lauren is a researcher who focuses on evidence-based fitness for women. She is an expert in female physiology, exercise, and nutrition. She also co-hosts a podcast called Front Page Fitness, where she discusses hot topics in health and fitness and provides reliable, accessible, and actionable information. I came across Lauren's page on Instagram when I was looking for more people unpacking more science-based fitness research. She is so good at looking at fitness health claims, breaking down the science, and then spilling the tea on the truth. You will learn so much from her, and I'll be sure to share her info in the show notes so you can follow her and keep up to date with hot topics and research. Now, let's welcome Lauren to the podcast. Welcome to the podcast, Dr. Lauren.
Thank you so much for having me.
So let's start with a brief intro of who you are and what you are currently up to professionally. I found you on social media, and I would love for people to learn a little bit more about you.
Yeah, I'm a former fitness professional turned scientist, and I was really interested initially in doing research in women and exercise, especially in the strength training realm. When I kind of got into the field, there was a lot of data on young men and not so much on young women. So I wanted to kind of fill that gap. And a lot of the work that I've done has been investigating the role of female sex hormones, so menstrual cycle, hormonal birth control, and seeing, how that affects exercise performance, if at all, and just investigating some of these potential sex differences, but always with a lens of wanting to be able to communicate, the practical application.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And I love that you pointed out there was a big research gap, because I feel like we find that in anything related to women and women's health, right? There's this huge research gap. So I love that you found that. And it's funny because even when we look at especially in the 80s, 90s, early 2000s, anything fitness related, it was really focused on men, even how machines were made or how everything was really built for the male in mind, was this something that you were interested in, starting from, I work with high schoolers and at a STEM school. Is this something that you were interested in terms of STEM research fitness in high school, or when did this kind of interest bud?
I was always active, when I was in high school, but I did, I was on the track team, but I wasn't particularly good. I was a dancer and a gymnast. And so that was really the kind of, I did musical theater. That was my sort of fitness outlet, I guess. And I didn't really get into, formal exercise. I certainly never did any sort of weightlifting until I graduated from college, and my undergraduate degree is in psychology. So I didn't really get into exercise science, in terms of formal education until I got my master's and then subsequently my PhD.
Awesome. What did you get your master's in? I'm just curious.
In exercise science.
Oh, amazing. It's funny because I am a teacher, I'm an educator, and I have my master's in teaching, but my undergrad is also in psychology. So I kind of had to do my own learning. I, did fitness certifications and different things, and I'm constantly always learning because I didn't know that's what I was going to be interested in when I was in college. Had I known, maybe I would have, gotten a different major.
Yeah, I mean, I sort of got a regular job, a real job after my undergrad, because what else do you do with a psychology degree? You get an unrelated job or you get another degree. And so fitness was really just a hobby. I didn't love my job, and the gym was the fun thing that I would do after work or on the weekends. And I started teaching group fitness, and long story short, I ultimately left that job and worked fitness full time. So I had my own private clients, and I taught group fitness classes. And that was really what inspired me to get involved in the research and subsequently to kind of go back to school and give up the fitness profession that I built in New York.
That's so cool. So I came across you on social media, and as somebody who's a health teacher, I'm always looking for experts and researchers who are actually, doing the work and putting out good information that's not like clickbaity and this and that. And it's very hard to find. But I was drawn to you and your work, especially since you are somebody who is a researcher and an expert in female physiology, exercise, and nutrition. And you kind of mentioned like, you got your spark and your passion in these three areas. But was there, you kind of mentioned you saw a gap, right? So what kind of made you hone in on those areas a little bit more in terms of female physiology, exercise, and nutrition?
Well, at the time, I was trying to optimize my own results and the results of my clients. And so I was curious, should we be doing something differently? And I was also curious about, the why behind the what. I think the one thing about working in the fitness industry was I felt like I was missing a piece of that ongoing intellectual curiosity. And I've always loved learning and I wanted to understand more. And so some of the work that I've done has been, more practical in the sense of translatable outcomes, right? Strength measures, muscle growth, body composition. And some of the work I've done has been very molecular, looking at, muscle biopsies and actually what is going on in the muscle tissue. And so all of it is really fascinating to me. But certainly what I try to do on social media is cut through some of the noise and say, okay, so we know that this is the science, but what does it actually mean for women or for people who are training women?
Yeah. And I think you brought up such a good point because you've shared so much awesome research on your social media page. And I love the way you organize your posts, by the way. It is
Thank
so clear and concise and like easy to follow. Like you have this great format where you write the health or fitness claim, and then that you research, and then you share the science, and then you kind of spill the tea and share the truth of like what this all means together. And I think that's really important because it's so easy for us to say to somebody like, go do your research, but then you pull up like a PubMed article and you try to read that. That's not for the average person to read. Like if they're not, they've never taken a class or understand how to read these documents with all these numbers and data and percentages, like it can be very overwhelming. So what inspired this type of, research and like content that you share on social media? So you're already kind of doing this in your work, and what kind of inspired you to start sharing it with the masses?
Well, I started to become more and more aware of how much misinformation there was online and how confusing it is for women through all life stages, because a lot of this messaging is really fear-based or really extreme and saying, you should never do this or you have to do this. And it really, a lot of that messaging ignores the basics that we know that work, and also that kind of decrease the barriers for people to enter the health and fitness space and actually start engaging in those kinds of behaviors that are going to promote their health. And so it really bothered me when I saw some of this messaging that was overly complicated, really confusing. And I'm thinking, well, if people are encountering all of this, then they might just throw their hands up and say, I'm not even going to bother.
Mm-hmm.
Or, they're going to focus way too much on supplements or following these really extreme diets or these programs that promise really unrealistic outcomes. And I think it can be really hard in an era where so many people are turning to social media as their main source of health and fitness information.
Yeah. And you bring up such a good point that like this is becoming the hub. Like social media is where people are getting their information from. And myself as somebody who, is a physical education health teacher and also a fitness coach, I will even scroll through things sometimes and I'm like, I would never do this. I would never do this. I would never, and there's just so much out there, but like, that's because I have a different lens and I have an, education about certain things. But like for the everyday person, I just can't even imagine how overwhelming that must be to just be cycling through information. And it's like one person is telling you this, one person is saying to do the complete opposite. And you're like, well, what do I do? Like almost like fatigue, like in terms of like.
Yeah, and I think it ends up with women, spending money that they don't need to spend or engaging in these types of programs that are really unsustainable, diets that are really unsustainable. And then you see this next message and this next message, and then you're kind of constantly switching up what you're doing and never really seeing results, because
Yeah.
consistency is one of the most important things. And I just think women especially are just blasted with this kind of messaging that encourages them to do really ineffective exercise programs.
100%. And you touched on something that I think is super important, and that was the financial piece. Like, this is a huge market. I actually, and I wish I remembered the number, but I can't remember the number off the top of my head. But I did see a statistic recently that was saying that the wellness industry is more profitable than big pharma now, which is wild to me because everyone is always talking about like big pharma and all this money that goes into it. But it makes sense because literally I will scroll through and I'll see this supplement for sale, this program for sale, this detox X, Y, and Z. And just like you were saying, like it kind of just comes back to consistency. And like at the end of the day, it's like you don't really need any of that.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm concerned now, especially with this wave of these compounded GLP-1 medications that certainly GLP-1s are excellent for weight loss. There's no doubt about that, and I'm certainly not speaking negatively about the medications. But there are these companies that are huge and very profitable that are now marketing this to everybody as a
Yes.
kind of quick weight loss strategy, even if you aren't overweight. And that is concerning to me because, I grew up in that era of, craving thinness.
Yep.
And,
Same. The
and
millennial.
I'm worried that we're kind of reverting back to that because it's the way that this being marketed. I saw an ad the other day that said cancel your gym membership, weight loss without the sweat, and marketing these
Yeah.
compounded hormones to people. And I mean, like, supplements that don't work have been around in the fitness industry forever, but now we're talking
Forever.
about injecting yourself with hormones that aren't even actually being manufactured by the manufacturer. They're being compounded in a pharmacy. So it's just dangerous, and it worries me.
Yeah. And it's interesting that you say that because I recently came across an ad and the woman in the ad was thinner than me, and
Yeah.
she was selling GLP-1s. And I was just like, oh my goodness. So, and there's the thing, there's a place for everyone. I know a lot of people are doing research on it, but I think when we look at intention, that's where the intention piece changes, where it's like, wait, we have this marketable, product that somebody can make a lot of money from. So it's like, wait, we can't just gatekeep for these people. Like we got to get everyone, access to it because that will make us more money. And I think that's the shift that needs to happen is people need to remember, like, this is a profit, like this is a product, and people need to make money.
That's right. And certainly as you market to more and more and more people, then of course that's good for business. But at what cost to
Exactly.
the health of the people who you're marketing it to? Not only physical health but also mental health and body image and potential side effects that we aren't even aware of yet. So it definitely does concern me. I went on one of these websites just out of curiosity, and you can put in like, I'm 5'4" and I weigh 120 pounds and I want to weigh 75 pounds, and they'll be like, here's a plan for you.
That's
Which is
crazy.
just nuts.
That is crazy. Another thing is, and especially because you are a researcher, you are a scientist, and I think about too is that like I still think, and let me know what you think, but like I still think we're doing research on this in terms of like how it affects people. So like I was thinking for myself, like I saw a product that was marketed towards me, right? There was somebody that was thinner than me using the product and saying like, you don't need to be overweight. You could be thin and just like, want to lose like 5 pounds or something, right? But for myself, for example, I am somebody who has dealt with SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, which, I was thinking about it the other day and I was like, wait a minute, like if I'm already having, issues with that, and then if I did a GLP-1 and that slows down how things are moving, wouldn't it make my SIBO worse? So I'm just like kind of thinking out loud here. And I'm like, I don't know, like, has research been done on that? Has anybody done it who has had, gut issues? Does it make it worse? So like, that's kind of where I'm coming from too, in terms of like, wanting more data and information because I just feel like it's being marketed, but like everyone is so different. And if they have perhaps other issues going on that aren't taken into consideration, like could it make it worse?
Yeah, I think that's a really great point. And the problem with a lot of these websites is they don't know your full medical history, and then you
Exactly.
aren't being actually monitored by a physician. And this is a medication.
Yeah.
And plenty of people that have side effects. Some of them will go away, but this has not been studied for use in people who are not obese or with type 2 diabetes. And so
Yeah.
it's one thing to speculate that, oh, there could be these other longevity benefits, but we have to really wait for the data. And right now, unfortunately, they're putting the cart before the horse with the marketing.
Yeah, and I'm definitely like of the camp, like you do you, boo. Like do whatever you need to do. I'm never going to tell anybody what to do, but I like, especially since I work with teens, like I like people to just be critical consumers and to make sure, like, understand why you're doing this. Who are you getting it from? Are you talking to a doctor? Or are you talking to an influencer who has a discount code for this GLP-1 that you're going to just get in the mail and start doing yourself, and they don't know your medical history?
Yeah, and to your point, these influencers are also making money by pushing this stuff. So
Yep.
it's, multi-level marketing here.
100%. Yeah. It's been very, very interesting to see the shift. Like I've kind of been in this social media world since like 2014, and I've just seen the different waves and shifts and like, things like supplements were the thing before. And now I'm seeing the GLP-1s being the thing. Like it's all the discount codes are changing.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm like, it's one thing to like, oh, check out my code and here's a link to the shoes that I'm wearing. It's another to be like, and this is what I'm injecting myself with.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I'm very picky about, and I'm sure you are too, of any brand or company that I work with, because like we were saying, the basics, like I do the basics. I'm consistent and I do the basics, and I don't do a lot of frills and fancy things. So to me, it's like I don't even wouldn't be able to utilize or capitalize or even push it with authenticity. Um, but so to kind of piggyback off what, like, we're talking about certain topics that you have talked about in research, but I was looking through your Instagram post and I wanted to pull up some hot topics that I saw that I often hear people ask about. And GLP was a big one. So we kind of covered that one, but I thought it'd be interesting for me to kind of go through it. And maybe you could share some like brief info on like anything that stood out for you when you were researching. So this one is a big one because I am seeing this all over my feed, but walking with a weighted vest, building bones, muscle, and as a weight loss hack. What are you finding?
Yeah, unfortunately, people are really misrepresenting the science when they're marketing this. And we have one study where people were actually walking with a vest and another group where people were walking without the vest, and there were no differences. So there didn't appear to be any benefit to wearing the vest. But people will pull other studies where the participants were either wearing the vest for 8, 10, 12 hours a day, or they were doing exercises like jumping and squats and lunges with the vest, and then saying, here, buy this and go for a 30-minute walk and expect to get all these benefits. So it's really important that we understand the walking with the vest is just not enough of a stimulus for muscle growth or for bone. We need more of a stimulus than that. And for fat loss, it's really going to come down to your nutrition. The effect of all forms of exercise on fat loss is kind of minimal. Not to say that you shouldn't exercise, because exercising during a period of weight loss is extremely important. It's beneficial for retaining your muscle. It's beneficial for retaining that weight loss if you're somebody who has a regular exercise routine. But this is being really overhyped. And my concern is that people are looking at this as this kind of one-stop fitness solution for women, and it is not.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it's interesting because the only time I had ever really worn a weight vest was trying to enhance performance. So I was doing like CrossFit at the time, and there were some workouts that you would put it on, but it was like to up your conditioning and like to make it a little more challenging. Like, for example, if you were doing like pull-ups, you'd wear the vest and it'd be like harder, but you're trying to build that like muscular capacity. But never like in terms of like what it's being advertised for. So it's one of those things like when people ask me, I'm like, hey, if you enjoy it and it adds a little more cardio or, resistance to you, like go for it. But please don't think it's going to do all these magical things that people are promising, perhaps,
Yeah, that's exactly my view. It's if it's going to get you to go for a walk, then
Yeah.
great. But I think most people who are starting to do this believe that it has all of these other benefits.
100%. Yeah. Good. I'm glad we talked about that one because I've definitely gotten some DMs on that one. And I saw your post and I was like, yeah, she did it. And I like reshared it to my stories. I was like, everyone look at this. I was like, yes, Lauren. Okay, so the next claim that I have seen all over social media, and this is another one where a lot of wellness influencers are profiting off of, but it's cortisol, and it's cortisol increasing body fat. If you have cortisol face, you have cortisol belly, avoiding fasted training, cortisol causes perimenopause weight gain, avoiding intense exercise. So basically people selling cortisol reduction supplements. It's just like, I've never heard so much about cortisol in my life. Just like, okay, what are you finding on this topic?
Yeah, cortisol is really getting a bad rap right now. And we know cortisol as, the stress hormone. And it's true that cortisol increases, in response to stressors, but it's also involved in blood pressure regulation, blood sugar regulation, your immune system function. So it plays a lot of really important roles and we need it. So if chronically high cortisol is a big problem, chronically low cortisol is also a big problem. These cortisol reduction supplements are absolutely useless. That's not a thing. If you actually have dysregulated cortisol, then you need treatment from an endocrinologist. That is medication. It's not a supplement. And so I think what's happened here is people are kind of borrowing from a medical condition and trying to make that translate to these short-term increases in cortisol that are really normal. When we exercise, cortisol increases because it's a stressor.
Yeah.
And then when we stop exercising, it comes back down. And cortisol is highest in the morning because it's supposed to be. We wake up and it's elevated because, you're kind of ready for the day. And then it's lowest in the evening before we go to sleep and we're kind of winding down. And so these fluctuations are normal and they're necessary and they're really tightly regulated by our system. So we don't need to be worried about these increases in cortisol. They're by design. And the idea that it's going to give you, weight gain, this cortisol face, cortisol belly, that is borrowed from people who have Cushing's syndrome, which is chronically elevated, associated with a disease state that needs to be treated. And in those people, you can see a lot of water retention and bloating and body fat redistribution. And so you might see something that looks like that, but that is a clinical population. That's not everybody. And so the way I see it online is people saying, oh, I used to have like this cortisol issue and now I don't. And they really just lost weight.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so funny too, because I had come across these TikToks where like I was literally seeing what you were saying. They're like showing before and after of their face. And I'm like, I mean, you look like maybe you changed your habits and like something happened. But it's funny because I remember during the pandemic, like many people, I was drinking a lot of alcohol and I don't think I realized like what my face looked like. I just thought this is my face. And then I was like, I think I need to do something about this. So I took a break, like I took an 8-month break. And when I saw a picture of myself from like between these 8 months, like my face shape looked different, but I was like, this was not cortisol. Like this was alcohol. Like this was like, I was like, very interesting.
Yeah, and it can also happen, if you have a really high sodium meal one night and
Yeah.
you wake up and you feel like, oh, my face is kind of puffy, or maybe even my hands are kind of puffy, and it's just your more fluid retention, and so alcohol can do that, high sodium can do that, dehydration can do that. So it's funny that we're just kind of blaming cortisol, but it's another
Yeah.
example of how you insert something that makes it sound really complicated, and hormones are complicated. And
Yeah.
so it makes it sound like, you couldn't possibly understand what's going on in your body and you need help because,
Mm-hmm.
have you noticed your face is looking a little puffy lately? Have you noticed like maybe a little weight gain around your midsection? Like, it's excellent marketing because everyone's like, yeah, that's me. So I must have cortisol face.
100%. And I think, yeah, like you said, like you're hitting people's pain points. Like they're looking for like support or help, and they're like trying to find an answer. So anything that they can cling to, that's, unfortunately what happens. So the next topic I want to talk about is one that I was seeing for the last several years, and it was on cycle syncing. And it was that people with periods should sync their workouts to their cycle and each phase. And I know you've done a lot of posts on this topic. I actually did a podcast episode on this too. But what are some of the things that you have found with this?
So this is based on the idea that one hormone profile is better for certain types of exercise performance, or you'll get better adaptations from exercise, during this phase or that phase because of these hormone shifts. And I've done some really tightly controlled research on this topic, and we don't see differences in phase despite big hormone fluctuations. And so this unfortunately has taken a life of its own on social media, where you'll see, oh, you should only lift weights, this week, and then you should start doing group fitness classes, and then you should do yoga and light stretching. And not only is it not supported by the science, it's also another example of overcomplicating fitness for women and encouraging this constantly switching things up instead of consistency. And
Mm-hmm.
we need to do things regularly, and we need to progress if we want to gain muscle, if we want to get stronger, if we want to get faster, whatever the goal is, we need to do it regularly. So the idea that you should just drastically switch things up, every other week is terrible advice.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I remember when it first came out, I was like, okay, like I'm open to learning, like let me be curious about it. And I started learning about it, but then I started trying to pay attention to myself, and I, would listen to my own body and be like, yeah, maybe on the first day or two of my period, maybe if I'm having a lot of cramps, maybe running on the treadmill doing sprints may not feel the best for me. Maybe I'm going to do something else instead, but I'm still moving perhaps. And for myself, it was really interesting because I talked about this in my stories one time where it was like the first couple days of my period, but I was feeling really good. And I was like, no, I want to go lift. And I like PR'd a lift. And I was like, can you imagine if I was like, no, I can't. I'm on my period. Like, this is the week I'm supposed to just do yoga. It's like that felt good for me. So I think, like you were saying, like it's just so nuanced, and everyone's hormone profile is so different in how they feel and how they are going through things. So it doesn't really work for everyone. Like this wouldn't be something that, like for me, that wouldn't make sense to do.
No, and I mean, I've heard from tons of women at this point, and you're right. There are some people who they say, "Oh, the first couple of days of my period, I'm so strong. I always get deadlift PRs, and that's when I feel amazing." And then there are other people who think, I couldn't possibly go to the gym at all on those couple of days. And so I think certainly if you have symptoms, which the most people who have a period do have some degree of menstrual symptoms, it's typically not for more than 1 or 2 days. And
Mm-hmm.
so that means you don't really need to worry about more than 1 or 2 workouts. But certainly if you want to skip the gym, or if you want to change the exercises that you were planning on doing or decrease the intensity, all of those are fine. And that's the same advice that I would give to somebody who wasn't feeling well for a myriad of other reasons. So it's not like this is exclusive to the menstrual cycle. But I think planning to feel worse or perform worse is terrible advice, because once you've put that, I mean,
Yeah.
once you've put that in your athlete's mind, then
Yeah.
that the psychological implications of that are dramatic.
Yeah.
So we need to be reactive if and when, as opposed to anticipating poor performance.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with that for sure. And like you were saying, like in terms of just everyone has their different things. Like I work with teen girls, there's every time I have a class, there's always somebody on their period, and I do my best to teach them to learn their body. And it's like, what feels good to you right now? Like, do you need yoga today? Do you think you can jog instead of sprint? Do you like, and teaching them to really like not take it as like, this is a time where like I can't do anything, because I kind of feel like that's how it was growing up. And it's like, I'm on my period, I can't do anything. Like that was just kind of, I felt like kind of like what we learned as kids, and it was just like, you can't do anything. And it's changing so much now. And I think people are getting better at listening to their bodies and understanding that like, hey, like, yeah, this is a part of my body, and like understanding maybe on this day I don't feel good, but like this day I can do something. So it's been fun to kind of educate them and get them to know themselves and not take this advice because that might not apply to them personally. All right. So our last one that I want to touch on is perimenopause and menopause classes, supplements, workout classes, and like it's having a trending marketing moment. And as somebody who is experiencing perimenopause, like it has been wild to see all the special like workout plans and diets and this and that. And I'm like, wow, this has unleashed like a whole new financial market. So what are you kind of finding here?
There's so much misinformation with this population specifically. And, I think that while it's good that we're talking about it, just like it's good that we're talking about the menstrual cycle,
Yep.
These conversations are good, but they've opened up this window for companies and coaches and products to come in and really prey on people's vulnerabilities. And so this is a time where for a lot of women, they feel like their body is changing, or they're experiencing menopause-related symptoms that can certainly affect, how physically active you are or how you're sleeping. And the downstream of that can have effects on whether you're adhering to the diet that you wanted to, a whole host of things. It can be this sort of perfect storm. And so people feel like they aren't in control. And that is a great window for some of these companies to swoop in and say, you must be taking supplements, or you must be doing this type of exercise, or you should never do this other type of exercise. But the truth is that what works pre-menopause works peri and post-menopause when it comes to exercise adaptations, when it comes to fat loss. It all still works. And so unfortunately, we're focusing on some of the wrong things, I think. But because women are feeling so confused and desperate and really wanting to do the right thing, it can make them really vulnerable to some of this misinformation.
Yeah, 100%. Like when I was still in that phase of like, I didn't quite know that I was in perimenopause. I thought I had like 20 different ailments going on that were completely separate. And I was going to all these different doctors for like joint pain and then ear pain and this, like all these weird things happening. And, once I did finally understand and it kind of clicked after doing some research that like, wait a minute, all these weird symptoms are part of perimenopause. And I started doing more research on like other doctors that were talking about it. The floodgates opened, and it was very interesting because as someone who was kind of moving away from dieting, I was seeing a lot of diets pop up too. And it was like special diets for menopausal women. And I would take a look at them and I was just like, I just need to keep doing what I'm doing. Like it was just very interesting. Same thing with the workouts. Like for me personally, like there were some shifts that I had to make, like, in my late 20s, early 30s, I was doing CrossFit like 5 days a week. Like, and then I got to a point where it was a mix of perimenopause and age where I'm like, that's a no-go. Like, this just doesn't feel good on for me anymore. But I was still doing the things. I just switched it to like 3 days of strength, 1 day of cardio. So I was still like doing the same thing, but I was seeing things marketed for menopausal women specifically. And I remember seeing it and I was like, this is just like the same stuff. You're following the same principles. Like you just keep doing the same things. Like it's not magic, you know?
Yeah, and I get questions from women saying, I've been a runner my whole adult life, and now people are saying I should stop running. Is this true? And I'm like, no, of course it's not
No.
true. As long as you're enjoying it and you're not getting injured from it, then you should absolutely keep doing what you're doing. And so I hate that some of this messaging is sort of discouraging people from being physically active, because
Yeah.
that's whatever you will do consistently is what you should be doing. And I really encourage people to lift weights. I think it's incredibly important for our health, our longevity. And the great thing about lifting weights is that you can use machines, you can use dumbbells, you can use barbells, you can use cables, you can do high reps, you can do low reps, you can do anything in between, and you can do a variety of exercises to kind of accomplish the goal. So it's actually a really, really flexible training method. And people are saying, oh, you have to lift under 5 reps, if you're over 40. I've seen this. Or you should never do machine training. You only do barbells and dumbbells. And it's like, stop taking away the flexibility that is sort of one of the gifts associated with lifting weights.
Exactly. And that's the thing. At the end of the day, it's like, choose what you like. Like, I'm a barbell girly. I love barbells. So that's what I'm going to keep doing because that gets me in the gym and that gets me excited, And then one day a week, I will do something with dumbbells. So it's like whatever you find, but as long as you are being, like you were saying, be consistent, right? But yeah, it has been very interesting to see that whole kind of new population and trending marketing pop up. So I'm glad we talked about this.
Yeah. And, a lot of people who are in this era of life haven't really done formal exercise before.
Exactly.
So it's different for you, right? Like, you've been lifting with barbells, and so you're going to continue doing it. But we have to also be mindful of who we're talking to and be approachable about the advice that we give. And so that's another kind of disappointing aspect of it in my view.
Yeah. And I think you brought up such a good point, because for somebody like myself, like I've been doing this since my 20s. Like I have been, exercising consistently, lifting since my 20s. But now that people are getting into that perimenopause, menopause phase, all of a sudden they're like, oh, people weren't kidding. Like we should have kept exercising, or we should have like had a routine. So like for them now, they're just starting, and that's great. Welcome. We welcome you. And so I can see why there is this like, what do I do? Because they haven't been doing that. So like my hope is that, especially with educating teenagers, is that like I teach them, please don't stop. Like start and then just keep going, because it will make things like so much easier. Like so much easier.
Yeah, and if you learn the right tools in the first place, I remember when I was in high school, there were no girls in the weight room. And there was no one telling us that we should be lifting weights. And we were bombarded in high school and college with, stick to the elliptical, or if you lift weights, you're going to get bulky, all of that kind of stuff that really deterred the young girls from doing any sort of strength training. And so I think if for a lot of people who are now 40s, 50s, 60s, they certainly had that same type of messaging. And so it's hard to try to shift that mindset when it's so ingrained in you.
Yeah. And like if you didn't get educated on it and did the work to kind of dismantle that, it's definitely like they're starting from square one, so I totally get it. So with people having access to the internet and social media, and the fact that anyone can put out information and content, people, come across so much conflicting health and fitness information. I hear it all the time from people. And even as an educator myself, I can see why it's so confusing for people who are trying to find reliable information. I teach 9th grade health and high school PE, and teaching my students how to be critical consumers is very important to me. So what are some tips? Like, how can the everyday person be a critical thinker and consumer and figure out if the health or fitness information is reliable when they come across information online, and who can they trust on social media?
I think it's hard because there's a lot of misinformation that's sort of cloaked in a scientific veil. And so it
Yeah.
sounds like, oh, this is supported by science, or here's a study. But keep in mind, we can kind of cherry pick any single study to support a claim if we want to. That's not what a scientist with integrity should do. But unfortunately, that does happen. So I think, if it sounds too good to be true, it is. If there is a overemphasis on supplements, that's a red flag. If there's any sort of fear-based messaging where, if you don't do this, then something terrible will happen.
I hate that
um,
one.
or everything you thought you knew, you were wrong.
Yeah.
We have a wealth of information on what we know about exercise and nutrition. If there was some big secret, it wouldn't be a secret. Everyone would be talking about it.
Yes,
So when you
100%.
come across that sort of like, I know something nobody else does, it's not true.
Yeah.
Science is very public.
Yes.
And when there's a huge, GLP-1s are an example of that. When those were approved, when people realized, oh, this is actually effective, the messaging was everywhere because it actually was a game-changing thing. And so if we had data that, oh, everyone shouldn't be doing this exercise, or everyone must be eating these foods, like that kind of clickbaity stuff. If we had that data, then many, many, many voices would be saying so. So
Yeah.
I think just keep in mind that extreme messaging needs to be double checked. And I think we have a tendency to sort of develop this tribal sense of like, I'm a fan of this person, so I'm going to take everything they say as the truth.
Yes.
And that's not a little bit dangerous. So kind of check your sources, follow more than one person.
Yeah. And I agree with that because there's, I have a lot of friends in the health and fitness and wellness space, and I will see somebody post something sometimes and I'm like, I don't know about this one. I like you, but I don't know about this one, so I'm going to put this one over here because I don't think this is, research based, but
Yeah, I mean, well, it's also the case that there are people who maybe they do have a medical degree, but that doesn't mean they know about exercise or nutrition.
Yes,
And
100%.
so this is sort of the Dr. Oz effect, where somebody comes out and they have a credential, but they aren't a scientist, or they received actually very, very little education about exercise and nutrition. And unfortunately, it feels like you have a free pass to talk about it anyway.
Yeah.
So that's another thing to kind of just keep in the back of your mind when you're consuming content. Just because there's a doctor in front of your name doesn't mean you know everything.
Yeah, and that's very true. There was somebody that I came across that somebody had sent to me, and it was a chiropractor who was giving very like hard nutrition advice in terms of like this was the truth, the all be all end all. And I was like, oh, and at first I was like, oh, are they like a nutritionist, like a registered dietitian or something? And I was like, oh, they're a chiropractor. Okay, like this is out of scope. This is out of your practice, but okay. It was just very, very interesting. So you and Dr. Eric Trexler have a podcast called Front Page Fitness, where you discuss hot topics in health and fitness. So what inspired both of you to collaborate on this podcast and provide reliable, accessible, and actionable info?
Well, there's certainly no shortage of podcasts in the fitness space, but I certainly am a guest on a lot of podcasts that are pretty serious in nature, and so is Eric. But this is more of a lighthearted chat. We've been friends for a really long time, and we do provide some good actionable information, but we also go through insane headlines that I see online, crazy social media posts. And so it's kind of lighthearted and entertaining as well as being informative.
Yeah. And I think that's probably why, because I even read some of your reviews and that's what people were saying, because they were just like, yeah, because it is. It's like, yeah, we're learning stuff, but I'm like, but it's like in a fun way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So my last question that I ask all of my guests is, what advice would you share with your teenage self and teens today?
As a teenager, I was very focused on weight loss, and I wished that I wasn't so much, because I think, your weight is the least interesting thing about you. And so I think being more focused on what your body can do than how it looks is some advice that I would give my former self and certainly any teenage girls today. I think learning how to lift weights was so empowering for me because it does really shift that focus away from the gym being about weight loss to the gym being about performance and what you're capable of and how you can watch yourself progress over time. And I think that it's not only good for us physically but really good for our mental health and our just overall self-image too. So I'm really grateful that I did find that in my mid 20s, but I wish I had found it sooner.
Yeah, same. Totally agree with you. I found it, later. I think the first time I went to a proper gym was in college. Like it was like towards the end of college. But and that's why I'm like so grateful to be able to teach teens exactly what you were saying. Cause I think both of us, you and I, and so many other women could have benefited from, instead of trying to shrink ourselves, getting ourselves strong and seeing what we're capable of. So I love that. I adore your advice to teenagers and your teenage self to really like reframe thinking, not weight loss and aesthetics, like really focusing on strength and like what your body can do. It really does, like, it's like this mental growth too that happens, like this enlightenment. Like, I don't even know how to describe it until people actually go through it. They're like, I get it. I get it.
Yeah, and I think it shifts from feeling like you're proud of yourself and you're achieving something, whereas that kind of mindset of always struggling to lose weight and feeling like a constant failure because it's never good enough, and then you spiral because you're so focused on that piece of it. And so it really can help just shift that narrative and that kind of negative self-talk that I think was an issue for me as a teenager and many of my friends.
Yeah, no, I totally, totally agree. So, how can we support you? Where can we direct people to find you?
I am on social media on Instagram, Dr. Lauren CS1. And as you mentioned, I put out a lot of posts on various health and fitness topics with a lens of this is what women are seeing and this is the truth about some of those claims.
Yeah, I am so grateful for all of the content. Everyone, please go check out like her social media page is so easy to follow because it's just like the claim that this, like I'm telling you, as somebody who like loves organization and information, like it is so beautiful and it is so important. And I'm glad that, we have someone like you putting out this information and content and putting all this passion into your work and researching and making sure people get the proper information. So I truly, truly appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah. And thanks to everyone for listening to the Pretty Little Lifters podcast. And I'm so grateful to our guest, Lauren, for joining us on this episode. And I appreciate you so much for making time to be part of this podcast. And I will be sure to share Dr. Lauren's info in the show notes so you can support her and check out her awesome work. And I will talk to you next episode. Bye.